So, hello everybody. Thanks for joining us on our latest podcast. My name is Lawrence Laidlow from Smosnet. We're in the upcoming series of masterclasses we're doing, Pitch Perfect. We're actually interviewing industry leaders in and around the East Yorkshire and Humber regions. If you want to find out anything else about the upcoming masterclasses, just drop me a DM at the bottom of this podcast, and I'll make sure you get all the information you need. But without any further ado, I'd like to introduce Steve and Rob this morning. So would you like to introduce yourselves, fellas? Let's start with Steve, if you don't mind.
Well, hi, thanks for inviting us on, Lawrence. It's a pleasure to be here. So I'm based up in East Yorkshire. I'm just to the west of Hull. For my sins, I'm a qualified accountant who moved into mergers and acquisitions around 5 years ago. So what I do is I not only invest in companies, but I also help other people to buy companies. I help them to understand the financials of a business that they'd like to buy. So we've got businesses in various sectors, and I work with Rob in two of those, potentially a third one. We're just looking at a third. Well, we're looking at a few. So yeah, Rob and I work together. So in a nutshell, that's me.
Yeah, thanks for the invite, Lawrence. And I'm Rob Richmond. I've got a number of different things I do. I got into M&A about 6-7 years ago. We own a number of businesses, as Steve said. I've bought and sold businesses before I got into M&A, but it was more now I focus on it 100%. So yeah, it's what I do. I'm more of the deal maker. So I do the report at the beginning, close the deals. I do get operationally involved as well, but generally I stick in my wheelhouse, which is the deal making side.
Very interesting. I love the sound of what you do, buying and selling companies. The word that I keep coming across is upscaling and scaling nowadays. It seems to have a massive resonance with so many people. And I'm just thinking, the way my mind works, I went, well, what's scaling? When I think of scales, I think of fish and music. Seriously, that's my head. Let's talk a little bit about rapport building. You've just mentioned rapport, Rob, before you're closing. Why rapport? Why do you feel rapport is important? There's a question to both of you. So if you both just want to jump in, that would be great.
When it's selling a business, it's like people have put their many years, blood, sweat and years into a business, and it becomes like their child, and it's very difficult to let go for a lot of people. So making them feel that you're the right safe pair of hands to take over is important in that process. So that's why we have to go for a very specific rapport building, so they feel they know who we are, they know what we're going to be doing, they know the vision for the business moving forward, which is very important to a lot of business owners. They really like to know where you're going to go with it, not just buy it. And so there is a process that we go through, and it's not just, hi, we want to buy your business, here's some cash, sort of kind of thing, excuse my language, but you know what I mean.
Is it not all about the money though? I mean, if somebody wants to sell their business, and for whatever reason, if you throw enough money at them, is that not sometimes just enough to get them to sell?
I don't think it is. There was a study done. There's another deal maker I know really well who'd actually questioned up to 2,000 different people who had sold the business, and 78% of those people who responded said that it wasn't about money. It was about legacy. About making sure that their business that they spent, as Rob said, blood, sweat and years in, they'd spent so long building this up, they've got a valued team. They've got all of their suppliers and their customers who they've built up relationships with over the years. They don't want that all eroding. And quite often, they're reluctant to sell to the larger companies because the business would just get swallowed up and never be heard of again. So for a lot of people, it's more about legacy than the money. Some people is about the money, but not always.
Understand, yeah.
We've also, the other part of building rapport is that we need to understand their real motivation for selling. Now, what they say initially is very rarely what is the true motivation. So over a period of time, we need to kind of ease it out of them, because it does make a huge difference to how we move forward. And from my perspective, I don't know if you agree with this, Steve, but I find a lot of people selling their business for not necessarily the right motivation. So as a result, that is why you get that kind of friction when it comes to selling. So I'll give you an example. Normally, there's three levels of entrepreneurship, which is one-man band, owner plus staff, owner plus management plus staff. They're still working in the business. And from a buyer's perspective, they're buying a job. They're not buying an asset, income generating asset. So what we're trying to find out is where they're on that journey. And if we can get to level 4, which is that final stage, then it's much easier for us to buy. And that's ultimately what we're trying to do with the business anyway. But you find that the motivation, if they're 1, 2, or 3, is about getting out of a job, not getting out of the business. Yeah. So as a result, I often say to business owners, look, if you didn't need to work in the business, would you still sell it if it was generating the cash for you? And that kind of opens up a conversation back to the rapport building again, which shows to them that you are genuinely interested in their journey.
I understand. I think I love the idea of rapport building, which is why I wanted to discuss it. The first thing I do, and I would say I do traditional sales. You know, I sell product and I help people that sell product. For me, rapport building is so important because people buy people, not product. So my rapport building, I don't know about you two, and I'm going to ask you in a second, but my rapport building starts the second I take a phone call or the second I start talking to a prospect. I'm immediately, things like their name. I'm ex-Air Force. I know a lot of people. And I always say, I know a John Smith. I was really looking forward to speaking to you, but I can tell it's not you. And they're immediately, oh, right, okay. And they understand I know someone like them. I also might say, I knew somebody in the Royal Air Force with your name. And immediately the barriers come down because they're starting to like me because they've got that trust that I'm a veteran. When does your rapport start?
For me,
my perspective.
So from my perspective, it's once you've had the initial contact, what will then happen is they will Google your name. So the first part of the rapport is actually making sure that you show up in the right way in social media. Because if they was to Google my name, they'd find a Facebook profile, they'd find a LinkedIn profile and a personal website. Now, if I was to turn up on Facebook with the words for drink with a traffic cone on my head, it doesn't look very good.
Oh my, yeah.
Very good first impression. So you make sure that you show up in the right way initially, and then from there, I will always then go and find out as much information about them as I can, as much about the business, but also as much about them. Mm-hmm. So with the first company I ever bought, I'd looked at a local, it was actually based in East Yorkshire, this company, and I'd Googled his name, and I'd found out in one of the local magazines or local press that he really enjoyed dog agility handling. And he had 2 dogs, Hope and Faith, and he was actually got so really, really good with it to the stage where it got to the national finals. Now, unfortunately, the national finals had got cancelled due to COVID. So during that first call, we're talking a little bit about the business, and I said, just by the way, so tell me a little bit about the dog agility. So he's amazed. You know, well, how do you know that? So straight away now, he's starting to think, well, this guy's gone the extra mile to find out as much about me as my company. So I always try and find out as much about them as I do the business.
Yeah. And for you, Rob, you're going to close the deal. Does that make it easier to close when you've built that rapport?
100%. If you haven't got the right level of rapport, you can't close the deal. It's that simple. Because they won't trust you to take on their business. And it is very much a trust-based process with us, because, I mean, they're literally handing over not only their business, but their livelihood. And that's a big ask for a lot of people, because it's not just about selling your business. It's about selling your job as well for a lot of people, as I alluded to earlier. And you imagine if you were selling your house and I said, right, when you sell your house, quit your job. That's what you're asking someone to do. It's a big step. And that's why we have to go through a very specific process, make them feel comfortable, make them feel heard. Like everybody likes to be heard, seen and understood. We have to go through that process. So I came from a sales background before I started this. So I knew some of the techniques to build rapport, close deals and things like that. But it was completely outside my wheelhouse when I actually realized what you had to do to get a deal done. And a lot of people, when when they're buying businesses, they don't do that. They just go down, put the cash and walk away. And as a result, they don't understand the person, they don't understand the business, they don't understand the motivation. All those type of things need to be put in place, because the other side of it is we take on a business. We don't know the business. We can do due diligence, but we don't really know it until you're got your feet under the table.
There was when I first got involved with sales, direct selling anyway, and I used to go into people's houses on an evening and sell a wall product. And they would always tell us, spend the first 20 minutes talking about anything other than the reason you're there. And it was, somebody sitting like this, you're never going to sell it. So you would build that rapport until they started doing this, and then they start nodding. Now you can go into your presentation. So do you find when you're building your rapport that you sometimes walk away from a deal if you're not building that rapport, if they're not going your way, for example?
Yeah, I've walked away from deals when the sellers come across, they've been very close body language, as you just mentioned.
Yeah.
Or they may come across as arrogant. And they're saying things, when I speak to them, you get a feeling for them. So the first call that you ever have is typically sort of 45 minutes to an hour.
Yeah.
You spend a lot of time getting a feel for that person, because it's as much about you liking them as them liking you. And I've walked away from discussions because I just thought, I don't like the way they come across. I don't like some of the things I'm hearing. And you leave it in a very open and professional manner, but I just end the conversations, quicker than you normally would.
I understand. Yeah.
There is another side to that as well, which is we generally have to deal with the business owner somewhere between 3 to 6 months, anywhere up to a few years after the purchase of the company. So we have to make sure we can actually deal with the person on an ongoing basis. Yeah. And if we can't, then there's no point even us starting, because we know we've got a longer relationship other than just handing over cash.
It makes perfect sense. I call it ruling them in or ruling them out. And just like you said, within a couple of seconds, and their attitude on the phone or even face to face, I know whether or not I want to even try and present to these people, or whether I actually want to work with them and coach their team. It's really, I can't understand it. I don't know if you understand, or there's a name for it, but within a couple of seconds whether you want to work with someone. And I think you can only do that if you get good at rapport building. Would you agree?
Yeah, Rob and
100%.
Yeah, Rob and I speak to lots of business owners, so we've probably seen the full spectrum of people over the last sort of 5 years. Rob's been doing this longer than I have, but yeah, we've come across all sorts.
Marvelous. Can we talk
what I do find is the difference between. Sorry, go on.
No. I was just going to say, finish what you were about to say, and I was going to move on to another subject about presenting. But let's finish what you were about to say, Rob. Sorry for cutting you off.
Oh, that's okay. I think the difference between a Zoom call and face-to-face when you're rapport building is dramatic.
Yeah.
I did a lot of Zoom calls throughout COVID, hundreds of them, and I did buy a business. It was actually one of the very first businesses I bought when I went into M&A full time. And what I tend to find is when you're face to face, you can read people's body language far easier. You can read their tonality and everything else much easier face to face. You just get that atmosphere. I don't know what it is, but you would think that Zoom, you should be able to pick it up, but definitely face to face is a dramatic difference. And I had one where I went in London where the person that sat opposite me had a shoulder facing me when she first started, if you know what I mean. So it's very kind of like, I'm not interested.
Standoffish.
Yeah, very standoffish. And within half an hour, the shoulders had opened up face to face to me. And I went, okay, fair enough. She was obviously apprehensive or whatever it is. The reason, could have had a bad morning, doesn't matter. But now she's opening up and she's communicating. So therefore we continued. But had that body, you couldn't have done that on Zoom because people don't sit there like this on Zoom, but you do naturally when you're face to face. That's all I was going to add to that.
No, thank you very much. I find it fascinating, and I think so, especially nowadays, we don't have salespeople, we have order takers, and they don't do, in my humble opinion, they don't do the rapport building. They just literally want you to place an order and take your money and off ski and to move on to the next one. I don't think there's as much relationship building as there used to be when I first got involved with sales 30 odd years when I left the Royal Air Force. So that was interesting. Before I get to the close, I don't know how you feel about this, so I'm going to ask the question. When you get to the close, is it a traditional old-fashioned ABC, always be closing? So all the way through your rapport building and you're ruling them in, you rule them out, and you present. Are you thinking about the close? You know, anytime during that scale, if you like, you can terminate and say, forget the close, I'm not that bothered. Something's not going right, so you don't do the close, or your closes more of a natural, yeah, let's just do it. Does that make sense? I'm kind of rabbiting on a bit there.
For me, I was always taught to assume the close.
All right, okay.
I naturally go down that way, but I will walk away, like we've said earlier, if I don't think it's worthwhile, or it's just a bad deal, don't like the people, whatever it is. If it doesn't sit right, I won't do it. But I do have a specific roadmap mentally where I'm taking them down. They can, we can go off it, talk about anything else, but I am mentally moving down a process, if that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. And ultimately, I get to a point where I go, okay, it's now or not, and I then say, right, okay, shall we do it? Shall we go down this route? And we put an offer in or a proposal. And from there, we're kind of guiding them down a route, yes or no, because there's lots of businesses for sale, and there are tire kickers on both sides. So although we're serious buyers, you do get tire kickers on the other side, where a business owner will go, yes, 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 all the way to the end, and go, I changed my mind because I don't like the weather today or something. So we need to get to that point so we don't waste our time, because we've only got a finite amount of time and resources to do.
Just to give an example on that as well, Lawrence, with the deal that we're currently doing, we've built up some really good rapport for a business down in Hampshire, and we've presented them with some heads of terms, and that's the stage prior to doing some due diligence. So it helps us to get as under the hood as we possibly can before we take ownership. Now, because of the rapport building, they've come back to us and said, look, guys, we need to just let you know that we've had a bit of a setback with our trading results, and we've also had this. So if we hadn't had that rapport, and the owners were a little bit more closed in terms of the body language, if you like, and to Rob's point, we wouldn't have got that information. Now, it's not the end of the world to us, and we're grateful that we've got it. It just, we need to think a little bit more now about how that impacts on what we're planning to do with the company and how we might structure a deal.
I understand. Yeah, cool. When you get to prospecting, you just mentioned, for me, the most important part about closing a deal is prospecting, making sure I'm getting the right people at the beginning of my sales process, so they're the right people to go all the way along this process to get to the close. How easy is it to prospect? I know, Rob, you just said there's lots of businesses for sale, but I'm sure you don't just want any business.
You okay, Rob?
Have you gone, Rob? He seems to have frozen, doesn't he?
I'll pick that up.
Okay.
Why?
Go on, Rob.
Sorry. There's a number of different reasons why we might. Sorry, got distracted. Somebody just trying to phone me. Lost my train of thought completely. You take over, Steve. Sorry, that completely blew me off.
Can you just repeat that question for us, Lawrence, please?
The idea is prospecting. Rob mentioned that there's lots of businesses for sale, and I'm thinking, how do you choose the right one? Prospecting for me is you're sifting through mud to find a golden nugget. How do you decide which one you want to work with or purchase?
Well, I've certainly got a set criteria that I prefer to look at businesses that are at least 10 years old, because they've gone through that growth period, they've established themselves, they have a reputation, and I would typically look for a business with a minimum turnover of £2 million, because the larger the business, the more likelihood that they've got a management team in place or a structure. Because as Rob's mentioned earlier on, the last thing that we want to do is buy a job, because that doesn't allow us to take a step back and look at the business strategically and how it fits with the other companies that we own. So we've got a set criteria to which we work to. There's also a level of debt that we try to avoid. So anything more than 30% debt ratio, I tend to overlook, because it makes it difficult if we need to raise finance for a deal. It makes it more difficult to do so.
Yep, that makes sense.
To your point, we can't really filter out the people. we can only filter out the businesses at that point. When we get to actually talking to them, that's where we have to kind of do that second check. Is this the type of person we actually want to work with? Yeah.
Right.
So that's the problem at that stage.
So it's like a two-step prospecting phase. You've got to choose the business, then you've got to decide whether you want to work with the person.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then we've also got to see how accurate the accounts are, because they don't always tell the true picture. Sometimes you find all sorts of things hidden, unfortunately, because of Steve's creative accounting or whatever it is. So I think until you actually there's actually 3 phases, I'd say. First of all, that initial, do we like the business from the outside? Then do we like the people? And then when we do the due diligence, is it really what they said, before we can actually go for the final close? So we got 2-stage close. One is heads of terms, where we basically agreed to buy it. Then we got due diligence, and then we actually buy the company after that. So there's a number of steps.
And I think just to add to that, that's where, with Rob and myself, for example, and other joint venture partners that I've got, it's that combination of skills that you bring to a deal. So my background, as I've mentioned before, is accountancy and finance. So I can look at and analyze lots of companies. I've done over 300 of them now. Rob's really good with the closing and the deal structure. He's really very creative. We're both pretty good at rapport building. So it's finding those combinations of skills that when it comes together, 1 and 1 makes 3.
Got it. Yeah. The sum is greater than the sum total is greater than the individual numbers, as it was. I'm confused. I forgot what the saying was. What would you say? A question to both of you. Answer it individually if you like. What do you think is your key to success?
That's a good question.
In this industry, persistence. Yeah, I think it's one of those things. You've got to really drive hard. You've got to keep going no matter what, because you can do. You would think it would be relatively easy to just go buy a business, but it's not. There's a lot more to it. And a lot of people who come into this side of thing, even business owners that are just dabbling in buying businesses, we tend to see that there's a lot of mistakes made, and that's where we can come in and help. And I think that's probably it more than anything else. It's just rinse and repeat, persistence, and
It's right. That's one of the things that Rob and I are covering in our new webinar series that's launching later this month as well.
Well, you feel free to send me the link, send me all the info, and I'll push it out as well. That's fabulous. Gentlemen, is there anything else you would like to cover? Is there anything you'd like to pitch? And is there anything you're doing right now that's challenging you and making you grow and stretch?
Well, I think
just as Steve said. Also, we got the acquisition playbook coming out at the end of the month. That would be a weekly webinar. So that's really to help business owners and deal makers go through the whole process, from that initial prospecting all the way through to selling the business further down the line, and everything in between. So there's 18 different parts to that series.
Oh.
So it's going to be interesting.
I'm looking forward to hearing it, seeing it, reading it.
You will be able to read it for sure. Yeah.
If I've got a day free. Well, thank you so much for your time this morning, gentlemen. I really appreciate it. Steve, Rob, it's been an absolute pleasure.